Hi, I'm Allison Alyssa Horner of AllisonAlyssa.com. I work with entry-level adults who are feeling stuck in terms of career, and I'm delighted to be here today with Bev Barnes of BevBarnes.com. Bev helps people find their true calling in life. So a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to talk shop with Bev, and I enjoyed it so much that I thought it would be fun to do an interview with her that we could then share with all of you. So today we're going to share our top tricks to finding your true calling. And we're actually going to start by looking at the main blocks that we see people like banging their heads against the wall as they attempt to try to figure out their life's purpose. So Bev, when we last spoke, you were telling me about a time many years ago when you were working as a career counselor, and you would do all this work with people around their career, but then in the end, nobody would actually make a career change. I thought it was really interesting when you were telling me about it before. So could you speak a little bit about that experience and tell me like what you think was actually going on with people?
Yeah, so thank you for having me today, Allison. So I now work with people who sort of feel like they have a calling and they've never known what it was, and they're trying to figure it out. But what I used to do was I worked as a career counselor, and so I worked with three different groups of people. One group of people, they were people who were losing their jobs, so it was an outplacement situation. And another group of people were people that were referred to me by a government agency to sort of change their careers, to find new careers if they were out of work. And a third group of people I worked with were people who were ill or injured, and they were referred to me because they needed to change their jobs too. The fascinating thing was that the people that were losing their jobs were the people that made changes. So it was like they had to have their back to the wall to actually change their work. And the people that were referred to me to make career changes, they didn't. There were so many things that got in the way, and mostly a lot of fears and a motivation, a decision to actually do it. And the people that were injured and had to change their jobs or had disabilities, they didn't change their jobs either. I worked with them for a long time, and what would happen is that they would go back to the same kind of work they used to do, and they'd try to figure out how they could do it differently. But the whole idea was that it's really difficult for people to make a change, and so there has to be something that's really hugely motivating for them to make that change, because they really get stuck on their fears, on their fear of doing it, and there's not a lot of models for making career changes for them to look for, is what I find anyways. How about you? What do you think about that, Allison?
I agree. I think fear is a very relevant topic for making a career change. I made a whole list of the fears that I've heard my clients or just different people that I know kind of come up with as they are contemplating a career change. Like they might be scared about what other people might think. They might be scared of rejection or failure, of making the wrong decision or choice.
That's a classic, huh? That they're going to do something wrong. That there's a right decision and there's a wrong one, and that they're going to make the wrong one. And they have to do it right, and they have to do it perfectly, and they have to start from the top.
And finish with their hands in the air, 10 points on the balance beam.
Right.
And then also I find it's really hard for people to make a move towards something that they're not completely certain of, which again feeds into making a mistake. Or there's also another classic where it's the fear of it being too late or them being too old.
Yeah, I've found the two. When I have a client that's really young, they say that they're too young. And when I have a client that's older, they say they're too old. So whatever you are, there's a reason not to do it.
Yeah. And then I had a couple more, and I know this is a long list, but also like fear of getting overwhelmed in whatever new situation they put themselves in, or fear that they might not be good enough, which can be manifest in a lot of ways, like I'm not creative enough or smart enough or experienced enough or credentialed enough, and all of those things kind of halt people right at the gate.
Big one is I'm going to, end up being a bag lady.
Yeah, that was my next one. Fear of financial outcomes, the cost of school or the salary potential of a different job.
Yeah, and I can understand that because it's true. Those things are, what happens is that those are real fears. People have these real fears. So it's not, it's not like when I work with people, I do not say, oh, you have this fear, that's ridiculous, because it's not true. People have fears. I had the same fears when I was changing careers. And, my career change was actually to start working as a coach and a consultant working with people who were changing careers. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
But so it's not. It's a big deal. It really is. It really is a big deal. It does take. Some kind of. It's not everybody that is willing to go through the process. So I really do believe that you have to have a really big desire, a desire and a belief and confidence in yourself, a belief that there's something, and that's why I work with people who are really looking for their calling, because it's the belief that there's something that I'm here to do. And it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a huge, world-changing, mega money-making business. It's just that there's something I'm here to do, and I know that, and I really have a desire to do that. I have a desire to create the work that's right for me. And so when I work with people, I actually tap into that desire, because that's what's going to carry them through. If you don't have a huge desire and really believe that you have something that you're here to do, why bother?
Mm-hmm.
And, and the desire to change careers because I want to make more money, for me, is not a huge desire. It's not a desire that's a motivator for people. Because if you want to change careers because you want to make more money, well, that means that you're not willing to have beginner's mind and start at the bottom doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that for me, that's not, a significant career reinvention. A career reinvention is when you're in work and you're saying, this isn't me. It doesn't feel like me. There must be something wrong with me. Everybody else seems to be happy, but I'm not. How come I'm not energized by what I'm doing? It's those people, the people that are somewhere where they know they don't fit, and they're kind of afraid to tell people, this looks like it's a really great job with lots of responsibilities and, a great salary, but I don't really fit here. And I don't know what to do, but I know that I don't fit here. That's the motivator that the people I work with usually have.
And I think that's beautifully put. That sometimes I've heard it put like, it feels like I'm waiting for my real life to begin. Like it feels like I'm sitting on the sidelines and this isn't actually me or what's inside me that needs to be expressed. Well, I think that that's a great tip. Number one is just I've heard it said kind of like, find your why, about why it's important to you to make a career change, and like really dig into that root, because when you have a strong motivation like that, it becomes a whole lot easier to go through all the different steps and trials along the path of getting in alignment with your true calling.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a lot of this is all about, the fundamental belief that we're all unique, that we all have special gifts and talents. And when I say special gifts and talents, I don't mean, the skills that you've learned. Like lots of people learn skills. I mean the things that you could do when you were a little kid that come easily to you. Like there's some people that lead, that they've always led. They'll never not lead. And it might be something that they're not doing at work. I've worked in situations at work where I was working with someone who was a natural leader, and she was not the leader. And the frustration that she felt was awful. It was like a horrible fit for her because she wasn't leading. And what ended up happening was that she sort of got burnt out, but she left the job and she started her own business. So she started leading, which was what was totally, totally natural for her.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that with all the different clients that I've worked with, and I'm sure you found the same thing, Bev, as a coach, I find it just fascinating to listen to people, to listen to their own unique preferences that they might not even realize are unique to them because they come so naturally, or I just kind of take it for granted.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's so huge. That point is so huge, and I'm so glad you brought that up too, Allison, because I think that's really the really big key is to recognize that you are uniquely you, that there's something unique about you. All your life experiences, your upbringing, who you are, how you approach life, what you do, it's very, very hard for you to see it. And other people can see that, but you can't see that. That's why working with a coach is often very helpful, or getting feedback from friends or family members, not on what they think you should do, but on who you are and what's special and what's different about you. There's somebody who wrote a book, Ken Robinson. His name's Sir Ken Robinson. He wrote a book called The Element. And what he said was he talks about your element, and it's when you're doing the things that you're naturally skilled at and you've practiced a lot. So you're in your element, you're doing something that you're sort of really great at. And he talks about the fact that we have talents like keeping our balance. So as human beings, we keep our balance, and we don't even realize we're always keeping our balance. That's what your unique talents are like. It's like things you don't see, but you're always doing, that other people see more clearly. And when you start deciding that you're going to create work around your unique talents, that's when you find your edge.
Lovely. I love how you said that. I think I've heard you talk in other contexts where you mentioned you had all these books on your bookshelf about finding career paths, but you didn't know what to do with your own career path.
Yeah, when I was trying to figure out what to do, because I started doing this, I think probably a lot of people or some of the people that you work with are in their 20s, and for me, I was in my 20s, and I did a degree, but I never knew what I wanted to take in school, so I did a degree in psychology, but, when you do a BA in psychology, you're pretty well qualified to do nothing. So I did this degree, and then I started working. I thought, I kind of want to work with people, but which meant, nothing. So I started working, doing various jobs, and started getting more and more responsibilities, and ended up being a manager in something that I didn't really care about, which is, I think, what happens to a lot of people. It's like you don't make any choices, so you sort of end up somewhere doing something that you're good at that you don't really care about. So I started this process. I was like in my late 20s, and I started trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had no clue what I wanted to do, and then one day I kind of looked at my bookshelf, and every single book on the bookshelf was like how to recreate your life, how to find a new career, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I'm just so passionate about this subject. And it was sort of ironic that, what I was searching for was what I liked to do also. So, yeah, look at your bookshelf. Look around you. See what you do in your life. See what you read. See the things you're attracted to. It's all about finding out more information about yourself and actually noticing it.
I totally agree. I think this makes for a great tip number 2, which is to be attentive and ask people for feedback and recognize your own uniqueness. And
Love it.
I really like what you said about looking at the books that you read. Sometimes I'll have people tell me the different types of media they consume. For myself personally, I spent a lot of time reading transcripts of the Dr. Phil show, a lot of time. And I was totally blind to the fact that I'd spent hours doing that. Totally blind.
Fantastic.
And I also journaled a ton and was totally into self-improvement, but I didn't have anybody to talk to about those things. I was in business school, and it was a complete blind spot for me, even though I was spending the majority of my time there. I didn't consider that could be a career option.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so funny. Yeah, I remember when I was in university, and this is one of the things that really held me back. I had this belief that I was supposed to be a certain type of person. I always kind of knew that I wanted to make some kind of contribution, but I thought that meant that I was supposed to be doing something in world affairs or politics. I had friends that were on the university newspaper, and they were into, doing demonstrations and stuff like that, and I was totally bored by that, totally. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Aren't I supposed to be making some big change in the external world? And, just like you, Allison, it was self-help and self-development and the stuff that I couldn't actually talk to these people about that were into, doing marches about issues. So, everybody's different. Everybody's really, really different. And acknowledging and actually claiming what you love and what you've always been interested in, and recognizing that you can actually create work or find work that allows you to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's really powerful. One thing I'm wondering, I know we've both trained with Martha Beck, and one of the concepts that I have rattling around in my head from her is the idea of the places in your life where you've gone through hell and gotten through it, as she calls it, going to hell and back. And I find that I'm noticing more and more with my clients, I'm kind of picking up on themes where they've had a big life struggle and they feel really connected to people in similar situations and that population and helping them. What are your thoughts about this idea of considering for your career the spots in your life where you've been in a lot of pain and made it out okay?
I think it's a huge point and really significant, and it's one of the questions I do ask the clients that I have, because when you're looking for work that has a sense, that has meaning, it's personal meaning. It's not a meaning to anybody else. It's a personal meaning to you. So it's it's always around, what I find anyways is that that's a real clue for people around the things that they are really driven to do, the things that are really important, the things that they've struggled with. So when you struggled with something and overcome it, you often have a desire to share that with other people and share how you did it. So I ask my clients that too. What have you struggled personally with? How did you get out of it? And it helps them to pinpoint that there are themes in their lives. And that's another thing I find. I find that most people have themes in their lives. We don't tend to look at our lives with perspective when we're living them, which is also why it's really great to talk to somebody, because you get this kind of perspective. But you look at your life sort of from an overview, and you recognize that, from this stage to this stage, these are the issues that I was always dealing with. And you seem to... What I've found is that there are themes in everybody's life, and the kinds of lessons that they've been learning, the things that they've been overcoming. And often those are the clues to what their calling is, what they are called to do, because they're often called to help other people through something difficult.
I like that a lot. So I think tip number 3 would be look for the themes in your life, the places where you've struggled and overcome as kind of a clue to your own personal calling.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about, tapping into your motivation of why you want a career change and looking at your own uniqueness, and then also looking at like the places you've been in to hell and back. If people have done all those things and are still feeling like stalled or scared, what techniques or tips do you have for somebody that's kind of stuck, or their fears are just paralyzing them?
Yeah. Well, there are lots of fears, and that we all have. It's totally, one thing I would say, the first thing I'd say is that fear is totally natural. What your fear is telling you is that you're going in the right direction. So a lot of people think, fear means I have to stop. It doesn't. Fear means that you are moving towards something that's getting you out of your comfort zone. So I'm talking about the kind of fear that's not like some guy chasing you in an alleyway at night with a knife. I'm talking about the kind of, fear we have when we're sort of uncertain and afraid but excited at the same time. So fear is often sort of a signal that, I'm hitting on something. I'm going somewhere. The first thing that I would suggest in terms of fear, and this happens with a lot of emotions too, is that people actually don't feel their emotions. They try to avoid them a lot and not feel them and shove them under the carpet and not recognize that they're having these emotions when their emotions are actually signals. They're telling them something about their life. So the way I like to look at emotions is that it's like a dashboard in a car, and your dashboard will tell you to check the engine. Well, your emotion will tell you something. So you want to sort of notice your emotion, and particularly your fear. Your fear is telling you something, and you want to notice what that is. And what happens is that people are, they're often, what I find with my clients, it's not that they're afraid, it's they're afraid to feel afraid, which is fascinating. It's sort of like, no, I can't do that because then I'm going to feel afraid, and that's such an uncomfortable feeling. And so one of the things I do, even before getting to, what's causing the fear or anything like that, is to just have people sit with and get in touch with their bodies, their breathing, and recognizing how, imagining a situation that they're afraid of, like, you're afraid that, I'm never going to figure out what I want to do. And sit with that feeling and just notice, because it's sort of being in a state of awareness, noticing how that feeling feels in your body. Most people, what they do when they're feeling fear, they do something to mask the emotion. So what they're going to do is they're going to go get a snack, they're going to overdo something, overread, overwatch TV, we have all kinds of over smoke, whatever, overdo something. So one of the signals that you're sort of having fear is you notice, gee, how come I'm having a whole bunch of snacks lately, or I'm, doing this activity that I'm really trying to cover up something that I'm fearful about. So it's sort of a signal. So once people have sort of recognized, okay, there's just a signal that something might be changing, or that I'm moving out of my comfort zone, or that something's ending and I'm a little bit uncertain. So that's kind of just information to know that you know about yourself. And then what tends to happen is that people have a whole lot of beliefs about who they are and who they should be that they've attached to. And when you've attached to a whole bunch of beliefs about who you are and who you should be and what you should be doing, let's say you train as a lawyer and your heart is in art, and the fear for you is all about, oh my God, what are they going to think of me? How are my parents going to accept me, or my family, or how am I going to make a living? Then we start to identify those kinds of fears and the kind of thoughts and beliefs that people have, and sort of work through those thoughts and beliefs to identify thoughts and beliefs that are truer. Because if we believed everything that we thought, we would never make any changes in our lives. Sometimes what's happening is people are believing the thoughts they think, when what you think is just a thought that's rolling through your head. Yeah. And as we were both trained by Martha Beck, and as Martha Beck says, your mind processes 40 bits of information per second, whereas your body processes 11 million bits of information per second. So what that means is that if you're listening to your mind, you're not getting all the information that you could get about what your next steps are. In fact, you're probably just going to disconnect from your body and go into a sort of a stress reaction. What you need to do is start listening to what your body's saying, whether your body is feeling like, wow, that sounds exciting, and not your mind. So in a sense, what I teach people to do is actually to clear out the clutter in their minds and to focus more on their bodies.
I like that a lot. That sometimes I explain it as your mind can get all lost in anxieties and worries and fears, but as you said, your body just knows, ooh, I like that. And when you get that clearer signal, even if you feel some fear around that direction, it can be a great guidepost.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that when you start doing that, you start with really small things, like you start sort of with experiments, because a lot of the clients that I have, they've never, ever followed what felt right for them because they just believed that they shouldn't. They learned from when they were little kids, like, most of us do, that, you don't follow what you think what your body's telling you, what feels great. You follow what you've been told you should do. So stopping from doing that or learning to do a different to live a different way is a huge thing. So often it's really fun to just start listening to when your body says, "Wow, that sounds exciting." In little instances, starting to do little things. Well, when I changed careers or started doing this, like I kind of realized I figured this out actually. So I was working in this job I didn't like. I decided that I made a really clear intention. I decided that I am going to create work that I love, no matter what. And then I decided, all decisions, that I was just going to follow the things I liked. So I stayed in the job. I didn't quit. And I often recommend to people that they stay in the job and not quit because they're working through this process of figuring out who they are and what they like and what they don't like. And if they're not exhausted with their jobs, if they still have energy to do other things, then why not? Depending on the individual situations. So what I did was I would on my desk I used to get all these flyers and email information about different training programs, and I've always loved learning. But in my job, I never took any of these training programs. But I got things on my desk that were totally unrelated to my job and that seemed kind of fun. So I started to go to some of these training programs, and it was really fun. And I started meeting people at these training programs that kind of liked the same things that I liked. And I started reading books that kind of seemed kind of fun. I started I sort of liked kind of spiritual books. I started reading those, and I liked them, and met people that liked these kinds of things. Clients that I've had, they've done things like started doing yoga, started painting. I had a client, a guy who he started building toy model cars because it was something that he'd loved to do when he was a kid, and it's almost like it puts you in this state of play and receptiveness that you also need to be in to really start noticing what you love.
Well, let me interject for just a sec, because I would say to go back to where we started talking about fear, the comment that I love that you said was fear means you're moving in the right direction. So I would say tip number 4 would be feel your fear in the moment and just sit with it. And I'd say tip number 5 would be listen to your body and to what feels pleasant or exciting to your physical response and move in that direction, even small moves.
Yeah, stuff that feels like fun, like when you were a little kid and was curious and delightful and fun. Yeah.
I think one thing that is interesting to me when you're talking about your own story where you started going to the trainings, I find that in the modern world there are so many like subgroups of people and populations who are interested in a multitude of things, and we can get so isolated in our own small kind of world and think that that's all there is, when if you take a little step outside into something new, you'll just open up the possibilities that are available to you in the world.
Oh, yeah, and, just Google it.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I had probably two more questions, and one was I have this hunch that with the just Google it idea, that sometimes when we go to Google things, I think that we're like Googling and clicking through and looking at stuff, and I think that sometimes our thoughts about what we're looking at can kind of halt us without us even realizing it, like, oh, that's too hard, or I could never do that. Have you ever had that sense where sometimes I feel like clients who start to do some internet searching, they're getting stuck, but it's not because of the search itself, it's because what they're thinking about, the things that they find.
Yeah, I think that you've raised a really important point because there's something that we actually haven't mentioned in all of this, and it's almost like it's a first step, and it's hard to mention because people don't know what to do with this. And Martha Beck mentions it in her new book, Finding Your Way in a Wild New World, and when she talks about wordlessness. And it's what happens when we're in, I'll just back up a bit. What happens when you're, unhappy at work or you're trying to figure out what you wanted to do, you're focusing so much on that it's a mind process. I have to make a plan, analyze it, figure out what my personality preferences are, do some research in the external world, see where I match up, and that's how I'm going to find what I want. And that's what we're taught. And I don't know if you've ever met anybody who's ever done that to find work that they want, but I haven't. What usually happens is people sort of start doing something, and then they stumble upon something, and somebody talks to them, and then they end up doing something, and they think, wow, that's amazing. I can't believe I ended up doing this. Most of the stories that I hear from people who actually do reinvent their careers, they're kind of, they sort of stumble into it, and it feels comfortable. And so the first step is actually allowing yourself to get into that state of your nonverbal mind, is to start taking time where you're not doing anything, where you're focusing on your breathing. You could also be doing something like running. It's not necessarily sitting and meditating, but it's doing something where your verbal mind is not part of it. And sometimes for some people it's doing something with their hands, but it's actually getting out of that place where you're trying to analyze and figure out the answer. So when you've done that, when you're out of that verbal mind, and then you start to do something like Google for a response, you're not in the analysis place. And so when you find something, it's sort of you're starting to connect more with what intuitively feels right. You might not even understand what it is, but it's like, oh, I think I'll research this. It's like approaching all of this stuff with a great sense of play. And I think that's what's very much missing for people who are trying to reinvent their careers. They don't recognize that this is a game. You play, you sort of play with it, make it lots of fun. Your mind loves to crack puzzles, and so you might have a question you're asking. How can I use my love of foreign film and my love of, making pots together, and you Google something like that, and you see what comes up and feels like fun. So I try to get people to, when I'm working with people, to actually make this all about play as opposed to about, an analytical search where they're going to have a plan and it's going to point up to something that should fit perfectly and there should be no problems with.
Yes, I love how you said that. I would say tip number 6 would be to spend time with your nonverbal mind, whether, like you said, through breathing or movement. I know some people maybe would get lost in something artistic or with their hands. And I think, like you said, that sets a wonderful stage for openness. And with just hearing you talk about it, the difference from coming from that place of quietness and not a whole lot of mental chatter when you go to do the Google search versus when you go to it with a very results-oriented, I need to figure this out, it just felt so different. And I could see how there would be a lot more opportunity and freedom in that approach where you're coming from a place where you're connected to your nonverbal mind.
Yeah. There's one more thing that I think is also really necessary for people, and what I think that is connection to others, connection support, because we're so taught that, you do it all by yourself, you just keep going and you can get it done, and it's the self-made person. But the truth is, people need help. They need connection with other people. They need to be around other people that are doing the same kind of thing. I'd suggest to find other people who are going through the same process that are like minds, because you always have, an idea that you're afraid to share with somebody else because the idea feels so new to you that you feel kind of vulnerable about sharing it. And if you share it with somebody who doesn't really see the world the way that you see it, your ideas go up in smoke. So the thing is to actually see if you can either join or create a group of like-minded people that are sort of doing the same thing, looking towards creating work that really reflects who they are or is their calling or that they love, and, share and support one another.
That's a wonderful tip. I'd say tip number 7, join or create a group of like-minded people. I know I've found that personally to be true in developing my coaching business. I connect with a group of other coaches, and it's so helpful to be around people who are going through similar things, and you can bounce ideas off of.
And, and particularly with women, when women are stressed, what women do is they tend and befriend. So when you're going through a group with people who are sort of uncertain, people help one another out. It's just amazing. It's kind of magical. It's, I've done the same thing as you, Allison. So I've always had a group, and I highly recommend that for people.
And I know we can both speak from our experience working with clients. There are other people out there who are going through the same thing, unquestionably. So don't feel like you're all alone. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when people come to me most often, they feel like they think, they have this deep belief that they're all alone. And, recognizing that they're not and recognizing that, you get this. And I think that's probably what I'm so glad, to do this interview, because when you're in that state, when you're unhappy with what you're doing and you don't know what to do next, you think that there's something wrong with you, and there's not. I like to call it, I think it's a wake-up call. I think it's like, I really think now's the time, with all the change and all the technology in the world, that if you are feeling that there's this something missing in what you're doing and you need to be doing something else, now's the time you can do it. The best new innovations come in times of change, and the world is changing tremendously. The fact that I work with people all over the world on the telephone is like unbelievable to me still. So it's just, it's possible. It's really possible.
Not only that, I think that as we enter into, or we're in the midst of all this change, it's the people that connect to their authenticity and are able to create work around it or participate in work that is personally fulfilling and meaningful and lets them have that personal expression. I mean, one, that's a lot more fun, but two, I think that that's where the most success lies.
Yeah, and I think also, one of the things that I say is follow your passions, find your true calling, change the world. And I think that right now we need all those people who desire, who want to find their own authenticity and their passions, because what you do is going to change somebody else's life. And it doesn't have to be something huge. It's going to change the world, and we really need that. The world needs you right now.
Beautifully put. Well, I think that's probably a good note to end on.
Well, it's been such a pleasure. Really great talking to you, Allison. And I should just mention my website's www.bevbarnes.com if you want more information on what I do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Bev, for taking the time out of your day. It was a lot of fun to talk with you and share these tips, and I know that for people who are in the midst of this struggle, it's going to be really refreshing to hear your perspective and point of view. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks so much, Allison. It was really fun to talk to you today. Bye.
Bye.